All right, time for another project. So we have had a overheating problem, I think pretty much since we got the coach. And the problem is that when we are going up a big hill in particular, so over mountain passes and things that we have here in the western United States all over the place, as you go up the hill, the engine temperature goes up and it gets to the point where it's pretty hot. You have to pull over. And when we pull over, if we just let the engine run, so idle, it cools down relatively quick, and then we can take off again and go a little while longer until it heats up, and then we need to pull over and let the engine idle and cool down. I'm not really sure about what causes that kind of overheating problem. Looking at the records for the motorhome before we bought it, the previous owner had the engine or the radiator record, and the coolant, I changed out the coolant when I was doing the heater hoses that go back to the hot water heater, and the coolant was clean when I did that, and then I put in new coolant also. So the coolant looks nice and clean. I don't see any discoloration or anything that would indicate that there was a lot of corrosion in the engine or anything building up in the radiator again. I always use distilled water, or I'm using kind of half and half mix antifreeze. So it shouldn't be a lot of mineral buildup or anything like that. So I don't have any reason to think that the radiator is plugged. The records also show that the thermostat had been replaced, and so that's probably also okay. I might replace it if I'm still having problems after my next repair, but I'm hoping that replacing the fan clutch might help with our overheating problem. So I've read lots of things on the forums where people hear the fan engaging and it makes a bunch of noise and things. I haven't really noticed any change of noise as the engine heats up. Maybe I haven't been listening for it, but it isn't anything very noticeable that I can tell. It's a little different than my other vehicles that all have electric fans, and you can hear when the fan kicks on because it's not doing anything beforehand. So this has been kind of an odd one, and well, because I'm not maybe a experienced mechanic, I'm just going to throw a part at it and see what happens. So I got a new fan clutch. The one that I got is a Haden 2747. So here's the part number. And there's probably 100 opinions for every 100 people on the forums about what fan clutch you should get. There's light duty, standard duty, heavy duty, extra heavy duty. There's AC Delco, there's Napa, there's Haden, there's, who knows, whatever brands, and everybody seems to have a different preference. So the one that I went with I'm pretty sure this is the heavy duty, not the extra heavy duty. And this seemed to be one that people were pretty happy with. The number of the comments I read said that people liked Haden, so I thought I would give that a try. Apparently these can fail and leak out the fluid inside of the clutch. So this one doesn't look like it's leaking anything now, so I think that's a good sign. A number of people said that they just, with various brands, opened up the box and they were seeing oil on the fan clutch. So feel free to comment and provide all of your insight and ideas, and maybe that will help me if I continue to have overheating problems. As far as the fan clutch itself, it looks pretty straightforward. Looks like a pretty nice looking unit. I've never done a replacement or a repair like this, but just looking at it, it looks like we basically got four probably either bolts or studs with nuts on them that attach to the water pump on the front of the engine. And then it looks like the fan probably bolts onto the back of this, and we've got the big fan. So my thought is, hopefully, that I can just take off these four bolts and then work the fan out to replace this, and I'll take it and do this on a workbench. I know some vehicles you have to take the fan shroud off, and it's a lot more work to get the fan out, so we'll see how things go, and I'll keep you posted on what my technique is. All right, so I got the old fan clutch out, and I thought I could, so this is mounted on the front of the water pump. There's a couple washers and things there still, but there's studs that come through from the water pump, and then nuts that are on the front side of this flange. And then the fan connects here to the back. And I thought I could just take off the nuts here and wiggle the whole thing out and then change out the fan. But it turns out the fan shroud is too tight around the engine, and so there wasn't any way to do that. So I ended up taking off these bolts first, after kind of loosening these, and then taking these off second, and then I was able to separate this from the fan and wiggle it out. Now, one thing that was challenging is there's a shaft on the front of the water pump that goes into this, and it was very snug. And so after I got everything apart, trying to get this fan clutch off was kind of challenging. It didn't seem to move at all at first, but then wiggling it back and forth, and I kind of tapped on it a few times. There's a couple marks here with my pry bar. Started to get it to wiggle, and then basically just wiggling it back and forth, I was able to slide it off. So looking at this, there is definitely some oil and stuff on it. I don't really know where it would leak, so maybe it leaks around this bearing and seal in the back. So maybe this has been leaking. The other side also kind of greasy and dirty. I don't really see, I mean, this could be leaking here and kind of coming out. I don't really know what to look for. It does look quite a bit different than the other one. So it could just be a different brand, or maybe, you know, one of these is more heavy duty than the other. So we'll see how it goes. But I think you know, getting it off was pretty straightforward. Just a little hard to get in there and work on those bolts and nuts. Now I'll put this one on. This one did come with a little bushing because this hole in the back is too big, and so obviously you want that to be centered and not wobbling or anything when you bolt it down. So I'll use that bushing. I think I'm going to get probably some new bolts to bolt on the fan, probably some new nuts. I'll put some Loctite on this. Did a little checking. It looks like the torque specs on these are like 18 foot-pounds, but there's not enough room to get a torque wrench in there, at least not the ones I have. So I'll just get them tight, but then with a little Loctite and lock washers on the bolts, I think it'll probably hold well enough. All right, we've got the new fan clutch installed, and I've got the fan attached to it. I've got it tightened down to the front of the water pump. I installed grade 5 bolts, and I got stainless steel nuts and washers and lock washers and things just to help try to avoid some of the rusting that everything seems to do here. And it was pretty tight, and so I just used a 1/2 inch end wrench for everything. But I couldn't get a torque wrench or a socket or anything in there. These are supposed to be tightened to 18 to 20 foot-pounds, and I just got them tight. I do have lock washers on the fan, which is what was on there when I took it apart. I also put a little bit of blue Loctite on each of the nuts and the bolts, just to try to make sure everything stays together. I use blue because I want to be able to take it apart again someday, probably. But just a little dab of that Loctite I think might help, just to make sure nothing loosens up. But I did get it pretty much as tight as I could. When I was tightening it down to the water pump with the end wrench, I was able to kind of turn the engine over just a tad. Maybe the belts were slipping, but still it was very tight. Just a couple of maybe pro tips on how to work inside there. I'm going to show you a little bit of my setup. Had a cushioned mat to lay on. This is like memory foam mat, and then I used the classic belly board to lay on, and I just used some like 3/4 inch plywood. It has a little bit of flex to it, but it was enough to keep it up off of the air cleaner and things. Put a little spacer on each side here to hold it up, and it just sits right on the rails of the engine there. So gave me something to put my tools on and my nuts and bolts while I was working. But I think we're in pretty good shape on our fan clutch. It's not really a very hot day today, and we're not really planning on going anywhere for next week or two. So we'll just have to wait until we're on a hot day going up a big hill to see if that makes a difference with the overheating. But I'm going to keep my fingers crossed, and at least we know we've got a new part there, so we've eliminated one more thing that could be a problem.